I do read fiction sometimes, and it's usually because someone has talked about it in a way that seems really interesting. Like the most recent fiction book I read was called John Dies at the End.
Yeah.
And it is my brother's favorite book, and he'd been recommending it to me for 10 years. So if you ever recommend something to me, that's about how long it takes for me to get to it.
Raising a well-behaved child in this world requires strict discipline and punishment. Today, we will look...
No, we will not.
If I am reading a nonfiction book that I want to be talking about, I will get the audiobook and the digital copy because because I listen to the books a lot when I am, at my kids' gymnastics or if, like sports practice that's starting up again soon. So I will listen while I'm watching them. And what I do is, because if you hit the bookmark on the audiobook, that bookmark transfers over to the ebook. And so then when I want to get my references, it's there. And then if I really like a book, I will also get the physical copy of it. So like the Samuel Adams biography that I read, I have that as an ebook,
all three forms,
audiobook, and a physical book.
I do, when I listen to an audiobook, if I really love it, I call them my book trophies. It's a very common practice among audiobook readers. Once I read a book, if I really, really love it, I will buy the physical copy for two reasons. First, I want to have the physical copy. And I love that we are reading in the year 2025, where now it's not just physical copies, but they're fucking beautiful. They've got sprayed edges, custom art, like cover art is this massively important part of what makes a book, the experience that it is. I love it. So
I know. That's why I loved your book so much, TikTok Sensation.
God, I hate that label. I hate that label. And come April, we probably won't even have TikTok anymore. So,
anyway,
if it ever gets a reprint, it says New York Times bestseller now, but I don't think I'm ever going to sell out to require a reprint.
So everyone go buy Gwenna's book. But so I typically am reading a whole bunch of books at the same time, but I do read fiction sometimes, and it's usually because someone has talked about it in a way that seems really interesting. Like the most recent fiction book I read was called John Dies at the End. Yeah. And it is my brother's favorite book, and he'd been recommending it to me for 10 years. So if you ever recommend something to me, that's about how long it takes for me to get to it. And I loved that book. Now I know there's a sequel. Have I read that? No, probably won't. But I did really enjoy that book, and it was so far out of the realm of anything I would normally read. That is a horror comedy book of all things, and it was very good. But I don't know. I just love learning. I've always loved learning, and so I tend to gravitate towards things that are interesting to me in a way that I learn more.
I went through a period. So I am one of those where I read a bunch when I was a kid. I was hyperlexic and learned to read by the time I was 4, and I did not stop reading until I was about 14, 15 years old. And then sort of life hit and puberty hit, and there just wasn't time for books in my world. Was there actually time for books? Yes. Did I believe that? No.
I had a bad home life and no friends. I'd read more and more.
I stopped reading for a while in my teens. I sort of picked it up again in my 20s, but my 20s, if you've listened to my online content, my 20s were rough. All right. There were some rough patches happening in my 20s. I tried to find refuge in books, but I picked the wrong ones because I'd gotten this notion in my head, oh, well, I'm an adult. I can only read adult books. And so I'm trying to read things like Tolstoy and Austen in the middle of a very crisis-ridden moment in my life. And I was like, ugh. Adult reading is boring.
I still enjoy some young adult novels. Like I read Turtles All the Way Down last year. Yeah. John Green's books. I love them. See, my thing is when even in hard times in my life, I'm still gravitating towards books that are very serious. Because for me, I have always found the solidarity I don't have in my regular friendships and in my relationships through books, right?
Yeah.
Because there's some things that I've been through.
Trauma dump.
And they're hard to talk about,
Yeah.
or people don't understand them, or when you try to talk about these things, you get hit with pity, and that's a very uncomfortable
Yes.
thing where you don't want the pity. You just want to be able to talk about it, right? And so for me, finding that kind of relatability through the books it's been a great coping mechanism.
I finally got to a point sometime in my 30s where I was like, you know what? I'm allowed to dress however I want. I'm allowed to do whatever I want to my hair. I can exercise free will, and I can read books that other people might find silly. So I didn't read the Aragon series, and I'm 100% sure that's not its name, but it was a book about dragons by
I read
Christopher
that in
Bailey.
high school. Yeah.
I didn't read it until I was an adult, because at the time that it came out, I was just a little older than YA books. And I thought, well, I can't read them because they are not formal.
Yeah.
False.
Being in your 30s is so comforting, isn't it?
It is. It is. And so that's when I started, you know what? I'm reading what I feel like reading. And so sometimes I read very, very serious books. Sometimes I read very, very thinky thought books, very elevated ideas, either fiction or nonfiction. And other times I'm reading fucking dragons and fairies. Fucking.
I've never been a huge fantasy person, but there are certain books that have hit with me.
But keep in mind, I do not only read romantasy, but I read a lot of romantasy.
Do you reread books?
I didn't used to. Recently, I've discovered, yes, I do reread books. Like within the last year, I started rereading books.
So because again, I read such a wide variety of books, but there are some young adult novels that I really enjoy, and I reread The Perks of Being a Wallflower every few years. It is an incredible book, and every time I read it, I pull something else out of it, depending on the phase of life I'm in and how old I am. And I think that's kind of a fun thing to do, is when you're an adult, to revisit some of your favorite books from when you were a teenager or when you were going
Some of them
through some
hold
hard
up,
time.
some of them don't. I went back to reread Boxcar Children, which carried me through my childhood.
Same.
I read so much Boxcar
That's why
Children.
we're friends.
Which how weird that a rather traumatic childhood, we would be drawn to books about children who strayed away from their families and took care of themselves.
You know, funny story in that exact sentiment. I couldn't find that word. Wow, that took me a minute. When I was a kid, one of my favorite books of all time was From the Mixed Up Files of Miss Basil E. Frankweiler. Have you read that book?
No.
That book is about two kids who are mad at their parents, and so they stow away on the school bus, and then when they get to the bus lot, they sneak off and they go to the museum, and they decide to live in the museum, and to get money to get snacks from like the vending, they raid the fountain at night. Like, these are all these things they do, right? I loved this book.
Yeah.
Okay. So when my eldest kid had gotten to an age where they could read it, I was like, I am gifting you this book. And there are a few chapters in it. They look at me and they're like, I don't know how I feel about this book. I kind of like it, but I kind of don't. And I was like, why? Like, what are your thoughts? And they're like, I just really don't understand why kids would want to run away from home. And then I cried.
You want to stay home?
You love me?
I'm doing it, y'all.